So, welcome to the Digital Culture Speaker Series, the inaugural session for the fall of 2020. Today, we're so happy to have with us Don Marinelli, PhD, who's been a visiting professor of the practice at ASU's School of Arts, Media, and Engineering, as he discusses the post-pandemic Brave New World, BCPC, and I expect we'll hear from him what that means. So, Don, please take it away.
Thank you, Robert. This is either my 7th or 8th year as a visiting professor at Arizona State. And I think the reasons why I enjoy it so much are going to be very much a part of this talk. And as the title indicates, I really want to talk about what the world is going to look like, or what the world might look like after the pandemic is over. I mean, it's funny how BC has now come to represent before coronavirus, and PC means post-coronavirus. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that there is going to be a post-coronavirus. But a little bit about me and why maybe what I say has some value. I'm a retired professor of drama and arts management from Carnegie Mellon University here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Carnegie Mellon is a very intriguing school. It has the oldest degree granting school of drama in the country, and arguably one of the top, if not the top, Stanford, MIT will hate hearing this, computer science program. And this merger of right brain, left brain is something that has been partial to me my entire life. And it's one of the things that led to the creation of the Entertainment Technology Center, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, because all of these things come into why I enjoy Arizona State University Arts, Media, and Engineering so much. In addition to that, I teach at Columbia University in the city of New York, and I'm part of their technology management graduate degree program. My focus on entertainment technology. Last year, I also taught at Robert Morris University here in Pittsburgh, and that was part of my interest in esports, competitive video gaming, which is where you see the Inven Global recognition. Inven Global being a company that an investment group that I'm part of invested in. Inven is the leading esports media company in Korea. We brought them to the United States. And my most recent initiative is with Carlow University here in Pittsburgh, where I'm working with them on establishing a graduate degree in esports management. So why am I so interested in Arizona State University? And that's because the School of Arts, Media, and Engineering is actually something very dear to me. It's very dear to me because the individual that really got things going there, Thanasis Rakakis, visited the Entertainment Technology Center, goodness, like in 2002, when Randy Pausch and I were first getting it started, and he said, I want to create something just like this. And lo and behold, you have the School of Arts, Media, and Engineering. And it was a site visit that I did in 2012 that alerted me to how cool AME is at Arizona State. And when one of the observations I made was you could use some senior people around here. He was like, well, what about you? And I was thinking of retirement. And I was like, well, you know what? To be honest with you, your winters are better than Pittsburgh's. And I'm a big baseball fan, and you have spring training. So all three of those things combined really did the trick for me. But then when I got to Arizona State, I became acquainted with the Center for Science and the Imagination. That's what Ed Finn is very much overseeing and initiating. And the synergy between arts, media, and engineering and becoming a fellow at the Center for Science and the Imagination was really the fruition of an interest that I've had my entire life. You see, my doctoral dissertation was all about Italian futurism. And when we started the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon University, we viewed it as the coming together of right brain and left brain. 50% of the students were from computer science or electrical and computer engineering or mechanical engineering. The other half came from all aspects of the arts. And that was based upon my lifelong interest in Italian futurism. Now, many of you don't know anything about Italian futurism, But one of the things that I want you to keep in mind is that it was the first art movement to embrace technology as the pinnacle of artistic achievement, artistic accomplishment. Now, they had failings. The leader that I'm about to talk about became a fascist, and that's also one of the warnings about relying too much on technology. But I love this slide because the Guggenheim did a huge exhibit on Italian futurism, and a work that I produced was there. And I was at the opening and was the only person who, in that entire exhibit, that could say to the people there, I'm the only living Italian who's part of this development. But all of it goes back to this man named Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, who I wrote my doctoral dissertation on. And he was a visionary. He was also extremely rich, and he had the wherewithal to create this movement that embraced all manner of technology and art. How influenced was I? Well, in 1983, I put together a group called I Nuovi Futuristi, which in fact invited members of his family to come over. But it had always been of interest to me that art and technology really had to go together, that they were part and parcel of the same thing. Now, I can say Marinetti, I can say that Marinetti is Marinelli with the L's crossed, but it's probably better for me to give you an example of who a 21st century Marinetti would be. And that would be Elon Musk. And one of the things about Elon Musk is he knows no boundaries. And interestingly enough, he's as obnoxious and as arrogant and as bewildering as F.T. Marinetti was in his lifetime. Marinetti, in the early years of the 20th century, his nickname was the caffeine of Europe. And it's funny because when Randy Pausch, my colleague who wrote the last lecture, died of pancreatic cancer, when he did the last lecture, and he had to describe the 6 years we shared an office, he said sharing an office with Don was like sharing an office with a tornado. And I was like, oh my God, that was an honor. I'm not sure Randy meant it as an honor, but still I took it as that. But Elon Musk is an example of that sort of visionary that Marinetti was. But it's not just an Elon Musk, it's someone like Katy Perry. Because when you take a look at Katy Perry and what she has done with fashion, it's right out of the playbook of Italian futurist fashion of the early years of the 20th century. And so the reason I want to point this out is I view AME students, I view young people as having no barriers to becoming the next Elon Musk, the next F.T. Marinetti, the next personality that will have tremendous input and influence in the world. So again, to sum up this whole futurism thing that has been part and parcel of my DNA, futurism sought to bridge the gap between art and life and to bring aesthetic innovation into the real world. Life was to be changed through art, and art was to become a form of life. Now, how is that going to occur in the 21st century? By truly nurturing and bringing together art, media, and engineering. In other words, our program. Okay. Now, this extends even more because Marshall McLuhan, that visionary about communication in the modern age, really summed it up when he said, those who distinguish between education and entertainment don't know much about either. He was right on. And that, of course, was one of the motivations behind what we did at Carnegie Mellon and the ETC, and what's led to arts, media, and engineering, and what in the pandemic era, with everything that we have experienced that we're going to go into in greater depth here, is pointing out that if ever there was a time that was ripe, that was rife for this convergence, it is now. Because the pandemic has shown us the shortcomings of our world of education and entertainment. So then this thing happens, all right? This coronavirus happens, this pandemic happens. And interestingly, I have to tell you, one of the most recent gigs I had was as a senior consultant to the Communication University of Nanjing, China. So Don was in Nanjing in March of 19, had a fantastic time working with my colleagues there who were graduates of my program. And Don came back with a very serious upper respiratory infection. I don't think it was coronavirus. It might have been SARS, but it took me from March of 19 to December of 19 to finally get rid of that thing. So when all of this happened, part of me was like, And oddly enough, I was supposed to go back in December of 19 and didn't because I was still sick. But this obviously has changed everything. So let's delve into that. Let's really examine why it has changed things. And we're going to have to focus on some acronyms here. WFH, work from home, and LFH, learn from home. And if we've learned anything from that, we really were not prepared for this. And in hindsight, when you take a look at what we've experienced, and when you take a look at the individual initiatives and technology, things that our own Robert is doing with virtual reality, what is going on with augmented reality, you're going to find yourself kicking yourself in the butt going, you know what? We should have been on top of this. We should have been prepared for this. Instead, we found, okay, work from home. Who's got an ironing board? Work from home. Well, gee, maybe I can work in the bathroom with the little ironing board. Or maybe this is what we're going to be talking about, where one person's working while the other is doing school. But even this is not enough. Fortunately, I retired after 31 years at CMU in 2012. I have a big house in Pittsburgh. It's affordable. I have 4 distinct office spaces. So when I get tired of working up on the 3rd floor, I can go to my space on the 2nd floor. If I get tired of that, I can go to my basement office. If I get tired of that, I can go to my patio office. So I was prepared for all this, but most people were not. And so it really comes down to, well, what have we learned from work from home? What have we learned from home? And a lot of it is all going to be about repurposing space. You know, I'm a big guy about corporeal space, physical space. And the fascinating thing is my daughter, my 33-year-old daughter, is a senior occupancy planner in Chicago for Jones Lang LaSalle. That is one of the largest real estate firms in the world. She is now spending her time undoing everything she's done the last 4 years, which was about how many people can you cram into a designated space while keeping with OSHA rules and regulations, when now in the pandemic, it's about creating space. It's about not having them working together. So she's guaranteed a job for the foreseeable future. But it's not only about what the pandemic is teaching us about space, it's really helping us understand what makes for a better space. Because when you take a look at this slide from BC, before coronavirus, I don't find it very appealing. So all of a sudden we find ourselves thinking, okay, how can space be repurposed so that we still have our space where we can work, but we're protected. We're protected from the virus, but we are also still able to communicate with each other. Because one of the things that I'm going to be harping on is that there is no getting around the fact that humans are social creatures. We are social beings. You know, unlike a baby giraffe, which pops out and within an hour is running around, the human child must be attended to, must be cared for. It takes a village to raise a human child. And if the pandemic has done anything, it's emphasized the need for family, but it's also emphasized what happens when we're not able to communicate and be social. Fortunately, here in Pittsburgh, where I live, we're in the green zone, which means basically we're able to basically resume life within reason. All right, restaurants are at 25% and all that, but you can eat indoors and all that. You know, but New York, no, not in the case. Chicago, the same problem. In fact, my daughter and her husband visiting here, they're still like, you mean go to a restaurant? And the answer is yes. But it's also pointed out the ridiculousness of much of what constituted normal existence. Traffic. I have never understood traffic. My entire life, I've had one rule, and this is a rule that occurred in the first environmental crisis that occurred in the early 70s, which I'm going to harken back to, where it was like, well, obviously commuting is unhealthy. It's unhealthy for the individual, it's unhealthy for the society, and it's unhealthy for the earth. And so if the pandemic is pointing out anything to us, it's like, well, wait a minute. Do we really want to go back to this? I mentioned that humans are social. We just had announced here in Pittsburgh that the Steeler games and the Pitt games throughout the month of September, no fans will be allowed. You take a look at MLB, NBA, doing their sports in empty stadiums. It's just not the same, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to tolerate that because we are social. And there is ultimately going to be a vaccine. I mean, I have no doubt about that. And we're going to learn how to live with this. The same way we're learning how to live with the flu, especially when, did you get your flu shot? Yes, I got my flu shot. Gee, I'm sick. What happened? Well, the flu shot covers like 40% of the flu viruses out there. You're just one of the lucky ones that got the other one. Okay, got it, sick, get over it, zinc, you name it, but I'm not going to stop my life. Humans are social. This is unnatural to us. And frankly, it's not healthy to us. So we know that we've got to get back to some semblance of social, some semblance of normal, but we have to learn from this. And that's where this education that I'm going to be harping on really comes about. And where the onus, folks, is on you, because I'm a boomer, all right? I'm a boomer. As of the last couple of years, millennials and digital natives are now the largest demographic in our society. You've replaced us because, to be honest with you, there's no more boomers being born. We're, quote, dying, all right? So the world is yours. Okay, this also means urban redesign. And I want to say something about urban redesign because at my old university, Carnegie Mellon, there's basically an urban redesign center that's part of architecture. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I think urban redesign should be as much a part of arts, media, and engineering, should be as much a part of the Center for Science and the Imagination as having its own siloed initiative within a university setting. Because if you're going to urban redesign, you're going to have to do it using arts, using media, and using engineering. So I have no doubt that cities will continue to be our social centers. And in fact, they will continue to be our cultural hearts. But now we have the chance to make them cleaner, to make them safer, to make them smarter, and to make them more innovative than ever before, thanks to the promise of technology and some common sense. Now, that's a phrase that a lot of boomers like to use, but you know what? Common sense exists. Okay, here's Times Square during the pandemic. It can't remain that way. It can't remain that way. But already leading up to the pandemic, we saw a redesign of Times Square taking place. We saw bike lanes being added. We saw 7th Avenue basically being a pedestrian walkway. By the way, I'm a native New Yorker, okay? Grew up in New York, then we moved to Florida, then I came up to Pittsburgh to go to school. So New York's home, Miami's home, Pittsburgh's home, etc. So we've already seen a redesign occurring in the crossroads of America. Now the question becomes, okay, post-pandemic, what additional redesign needs to occur? Because one of the things that is becoming obvious all over the world is greenery. We need green space. We need to reclaim space. And we need space because, first of all, it's green. Green means oxygen. Green means absorbing carbon dioxide. And so even here in Pittsburgh, we are finding a significant redesign going on of more pedestrian ways downtown, more bike ways, more rent a bike, more rent a scooter. And if anything, we need to keep this going. But even more significantly, you need to use it. Right? You need to use it. I use it as much as I can. All right? We see that as design is improving, that increasingly, if you have a footprint, how much of that footprint is going to be made available to open space so that we can, in fact, enjoy the outside, but keep our distance. I remember when I first moved to Pittsburgh, it boasted that it had more trees than any city in the world. Atlanta ultimately took that over. But now what we've had is the, that bug, that boll weevil or something like that, that's been eating the trees. And so the city's been cutting them down. And I'm so happy because the citizenry here is like, you cut down a tree, you replant it because we want our trees. So when we're going to be talking about this urban redesign, it's a phrase that Jason Goodall from Fortune magazine has coined. It's called globalization. And it's the need for governments and the private sector to work smarter and more closely together than ever before. So what does that mean? It means ubiquitous connectivity. You know, in the 1930s, under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, there was a creation of the Tennessee Valley Authority. And the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, was a reaction to the fact that the whole Tennessee Valley, the Appalachia and all that, they didn't have electricity, right? They did not have electricity. And in a country like the United States, which frankly at that time was in a depression, but it needed to get out of the depression. In other words, there was work that needed to happen, but we knew about this technology called electricity. It was, let's create an infrastructure, damming and what have you, a grid and all that, to bring electricity to the Tennessee Valley. Korea is a country that I've worked in. In fact, I may end up doing a residency there as soon as COVID calms down. That Korea itself underwent a complete transformation once its government committed itself to ubiquitous connectivity. I mean, Korea is a country where you can be on the top of a mountain, and 70% of Korea is mountains, and you can have Wi-Fi. You can download videos and what have you. The fact that that is not the case in this country has been somewhat understandable since Korea is the size of Indiana, but it's time to overcome that. So we need to make sure that every community in this country, everywhere in this country, has ubiquitous connectivity. Collaboration and teamwork is essential. It's one of the reasons why I think arts, media, and engineering should be part of any sort of urban redesign that ASU might be undertaking. The other thing is, what we've learned from the pandemic is that telemedicine is a thing that needs to be nurtured. And yet, interestingly enough, the last time I was at the ASU, and you go across University Boulevard, and where the old comic book store was basically a telemedicine center. Because I remember walking in there going, what is this all about? And it's like, well, it's telemedicine, and then the doctor will see you. And if the doctor recommends a prescription or what have you, we have basically a computerized pharmacy on site, so you can get it. Oh, and by the way, it's $25 for a telemedicine visit. And I was like, well, I just saw the future. I just saw the future. I'm part of another investment group that is basically, I can't tell you the whole thing, but is using telemedicine for enhanced diagnostic purposes. And then the other thing is, you like data analytics? We've got more health data than we know what to do with. It is time to analyze that. Now, research and development, projects, interests, things that you might consider in terms of majors, of focus, of careers. Let's face it, over the top, everything is winning in entertainment. Okay. In fact, folks, we're in a golden age of narrative content. We're in a golden age of linear narrative content, And thanks to the work of people like Robert, the people like at Shell Games and all that, pretty soon we're going to be in a golden age of non-linear narrative content. So OTT everything is it. Then the other thing is, you hear about 5G, and 5G is a means to an end. And the means to that end is the Internet of Things. IoT has got such incredible opportunity. Why? Because the estimate is, as of this year, there are over 50 billion connected devices. Now, usually we hear about this when something gets hacked, when there's a ransomware, but let's look at the silver lining, okay? The silver lining is, if we've got 50 billion devices that have the potential to being connected, and in fact, I wear a Fitbit, right? I have sleep apnea. My CPAP machine, all of those readings go directly to my sleep apnea doctor, who I'm seeing on Monday, and she's she'll be able to check out how well I'm doing on those things. And it's like, folks, the opportunities are there. They're begging to be exploited. And exploited by who? Exploited by you. Then something that I'm really excited about is the new reality, the world that you live in. The world that you live in involves this thing called a cell phone. It involves gaming. It involves augmented reality. It involves virtual reality. And in fact, it goes even beyond that, and it involves alternate reality. Because the course I teach at Columbia University is titled Managing the Entertainment Technology Multiverse. And it recognizes that you digital natives, are doing something that I was never able to do when I was young. And that is, you're able to inhabit multiple dimensions of reality. You are able, in fact, to inhabit a different you. You can have an alternate reality, your avatar, your Facebook persona, your Don's going to show his age, your Second Life persona, your figure it out. Augmented reality, I mean, we're all using it to find our way through, to navigate through physical space. Virtual reality can teach us so much. If there was virtual reality when Don was a kid, I would not have failed geometry, okay? I would be able to get it. And one thing that learned from home that shortcomings have shown us is that we're not letting the computer be the computer. We're not letting the technology be the technology. We're not letting it drive content. And it is time that we do that. And in fact, in the same way that, what do we have? Operation Warp Speed to find a vaccine, it should now be Operation Warp Speed to realize what shortcomings in educational content have been exposed by the need to learn from home, and focus our energies on how do we make a class that you can learn from home that has all the advantages, or as many of the advantages as possible, of being there in real time. Because the one thing that I love about this is it enhances productivity and it allows for earlier learning. I mean, let's take a look at language learning software. You're now able to learn a language faster than you ever could before. All right, Pittsburgh is the home of Duolingo, which a colleague of mine from Carnegie Mellon, Louis Van On, started. It's the #1 language learning software that's out there. Hiring galore. I mean, they can't hire enough people. But it shows you that by using technology, letting this technology be what it can be, we can enhance, we can speed up learning and the acquisition of knowledge. Now, the other thing the pandemic has shown us, in good and bad ways, is that it's providing us with the option for an environmental jumpstart. Because the coronavirus pandemic has had an impact on the environment in a whole number of ways. Carbon emissions, lower than they have been since modern times. Waste, well, that's how you look at waste. There's a lot more waste because everybody's doing takeout and what have you, but there's a lot less waste in terms of driving cars, backups, you name it. Wildlife and habitat, they probably don't want the coronavirus to end. I live in the heart of Pittsburgh. We have wild turkeys, we have rabbits, we have foxes. My garden, the only thing missing from my garden is Elmer Fudd to try to protect it. There's been an exponential growth in wildlife. And energy, it's kind of been good and bad. We're now able to supply the energy we need because we're not using it that much, but that should not lessen the desire to move beyond fossil fuels. So again, one of the things we see is if we can get rid of this in some capacity, the earth is going to be happy for us, but not just the earth, we're going to be happy, all right? We're going to be happier that we don't have to put up with this. But let me tell you what I've also been seeing, which is very disappointing. Oh, by the way, Venezia, I'm Italian, right? Somewhere between this Grand Canal being clogged like an LA freeway and being empty is the happy medium, okay? But I want to point out something to all of you, especially those of you who are like, okay, boomer types. This is one boomer who celebrated the fact on April of 1970 when Earth Day was established, okay? Don at 1970 was 17 years old. And I know because that's when I got my draft notice, okay? And I turned environmentalist in 1970. And you could even ask my wife and daughter, they hate going out with me because I pick up trash. And my generation, you see all these people here, I wonder how many of them really followed through. Because now it's sort of going to be like Don's true confessions of an aging boomer, which is where we've let you down, right? Where we helped create the world that we see today. I don't know about Phoenix, but here in Pittsburgh, I could spend most of my time picking up discarded masks. And frankly, I don't get it, folks. I don't get it. If you do anything for Uncle Don, throw your mask away in the proper place. This hurts. It hurts us all to see this, okay? But now I'm going to transition, folks, to a whole nother thing. You've heard me talk about WFH, work from home. You've heard me talk about LFH, learn from home. But now it's going to be like boomer confessional time with WTF. And I'm going to let you figure out what that means. Because what you're taking a look at here, ladies and gentlemen, is 1967. All right. By then, we were living in Miami, and Don was this very young hippie helping engage in civil rights marches in Liberty City and all that. This is 1967. There's Martin Luther King. It pains me to think this in the year 2020 is still going on. And I can't help but think, okay, how many of my generation talked a good game but didn't walk a good game? If you think this is something, take a look at this. This is 1968. It is the year 2020, and we now have the National Guard out in Minneapolis. We now have the National Guard out in Kenosha. And I sit there and I'm going, what happened to the peace, love, and understanding that my generation said we were going to bring onto the world? Obviously, it did not happen. It did not happen, which means it's up to you to make it happen. You see this here? This isn't Ferguson. This isn't Minneapolis. This is Watts in 1968. And here it is, the year 2020, and the fires are still raging. The looting is still going on. I consider that a failure of my generation. And when I say my generation, I mean, who became the politicians? Who became the corporate leaders? Who cut their hair? Who joined in? Who thought it was just a fad, that what we were fighting for back then was just a fad? That saddens me to no end. the fact that we haven't taken care of our indigenous populations, that this is still an issue. And it's one of those issues that Don going to Arizona really, saw it come to fruition. I mean, hey, again, as an Italian, as a Sicilian, I'm like, hey, the casinos, go for it. It's about time you got your money back. But the other part of me is like, what about rispetto? I mean, what about every opportunity we can possibly give to those who were here before us? Now, I like Cristoforo Colombo, and you better not touch his statue while I'm around. But come on, we need equal time, folks. So what I want to do now is talk about why you should have faith in each other and faith in the human race. Look, this is San Francisco after the earthquake of 1906. This is San Francisco today. And even after the earthquake of 1988. This is Hiroshima in 1945. This is Hiroshima today. And I had the honor, the privilege of having an entertainment technology center campus in Osaka, Japan, for 6 years. And I used to commute there and just loved Japan. And the funny thing was, I would go to Japan with funders here from Pittsburgh who fought in the war and who they forgave. It was like, you know what? It's over. It's done with. Let's live for today. I've got one of my surrogate fathers, 6 years old, lives in Jersey. He was a prisoner of the Japanese. He has no animosity whatsoever. And I'm like, come on, folks, if they can do it, we can do it. How about Berlin, 1945? How about Berlin today? And you know what's so exciting about Berlin today? It's become the youth capital of Germany. I mean, of Europe. It is where young people flock. I've had colleagues of mine who have left the US and gone to Berlin. But even more than that, folks, keep in mind that it wasn't just rebuilding, it was basically reconfiguring a society. Because the Japan of today is not the imperial Japan of the 30s and the 40s. The Germany today is not the Germany of you know who. In fact, if anything, they're thriving democracies. And it's like, folks, if they can do it, we should be able to heal our wounds, let alone Lower Manhattan, 2001. Let me tell you something. I used to take my students on field trips. On September 9th, 2001, we did a field trip to, you guessed it, New York. And on September 9th, 2001, I took the students, we rented a bus and we went through the World Trade Center, boasted about it. And my brother, who was a New York City bus driver, his first day back at work from an operation was, you guessed it, September 11th, 2001. He did the express bus from Staten Island to Manhattan. Where was his first stop? World Trade Center Tower A. Second stop, Tower B. And in fact, he was on the West Side Highway coming back when the planes hit. So that was Lower Manhattan 2001. This is Lower Manhattan 2020. This is about rebirth and resurrection. What I want to add to the is renaissance. I want a rebirth of things. Because folks, we're concerned about the pandemic. When I was a kid in the 1950s, polio was the thing that scared the bejesus out of us. And the interesting thing is, I had an uncle who died during the Second World War, but he died of tuberculosis because tuberculosis was the scourge. He caught it while he was in the Navy and died in 1944 in Saranac Lake, New York. In the 50s, it was about polio. Polio vaccine was created where? About 7 blocks from my house at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center by Jonas Salk. And so polio today in 2016, guess what? It was confined to 3 endemic countries, otherwise essentially eradicated. We can do this. We know we can do this. So I want to go back to where I began, futurism's legacy. The futurists alloyed social, revolutionary, anarchistic, and national chauvinistic positions with a euphoric faith in progress. And on top of this, created the formal repertoire of the modern avant-garde. That meant what we in the 60s called happenings, polemics, manifestos, and aggressive agitation. That's one of the reasons why I can look at the rioting and I can say, you know what? It's either rioting or it's aggressive agitation. The futurists were not loving people, right? They wanted turmoil because they viewed turmoil as one of the ways in which the standing order could be overturned and a new sensitivity created. So what do we mean by that new sensitivity? A lot of the new sensitivity, folks, is the old sensitivity. Because in the same way that the Greeks would go to the Oracle of Delphi and they would encounter basically signage on the way there. And the signage was, two of the signs were very important. One was, know thyself. And the other one was, all things in moderation. It requires of you self-regulation. When Robert and I were chatting before this began, he brought up how President Crow just released essentially a warning that if ASU students are caught boasting of their partying on Facebook, they suffer the possibility of being suspended or expelled. That exists at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, what does that really require of you? That requires some self-regulation, or what your father or grandfather might call some common sense. You can do that. If you can't do that, then I question whether you can do all those things that I was talking about. This also requires interpersonal knowledge and skills. If there's any lamentation I have about the cell phone, is the inability to communicate verbally. And yet, on the other hand, I kind of like how you're redoing language. I kind of like having to know the acronyms. I'm fascinated seeing how the English language is becoming as much a character-based language as is Chinese or some other Asian languages. I'm expecting novels pretty soon to be written purely in emojis. And even more exciting, that we're going to understand what they're saying. But all of this ultimately is going to rely on you developing a positive self-identity. And it's funny because as you get older, that positive self-identity is going to matter even more. You know, it's funny because I do a lot of consulting all over the world, in fact. And recently I had one client approach me and saying that, well, Don, we consider you to be like the Carl Sagan of this subject. And I said, well, you know, that's not going to reach that many people if they don't know about Cosmos and they don't know about, you know, him. I said, but I wouldn't mind becoming Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I was like, geez, I'll do that. If I can become Obi-Wan Kenobi, fine. This also means cultural acceptance and competence. And folks, that also means understanding the boomer, okay? Maybe discounting the boomer that's telling you how you should live your life, which I hopefully am not doing, but understanding cultural acceptance all over the world. Because one of the biggest concerns we have about the world is, are we going to fall into tribalism? Are we going to self-segregate? Because frankly, that's one of the things we're seeing in our political discourse. I mean, I'm one of those, you shouldn't censor a damn thing. You should have as many different speakers come as possible. I was very fortunate to become the president of student government when I was in undergraduate school. I invited every whack job possible. I would have the Eckankar people come and they would talk about how they were doing interplanetary travel. I would have the vegans come. I would have every honorary council of a country come to tell us about their cultures. And when I was running the ETC, I made it ETC Global. But it also means that you're empowered to set and adopt social values. And if those social values are changing the way we talk about people, if they're about changing the names of things, if they're about evolving our society, then go for it. But ultimately, it's also going to involve planning and decision-making skills. And hopefully that's what you're learning at ASU. And that's what you're learning in arts, media, and engineering. Because if we're going to bring together science, science and the imagination, you'll notice what Ed Finn and his team are doing is they're aligning science fiction visionaries with engineers. So we can figure out how realistic it is for some of these sci-fi ideas to come about. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is the presentation that I have for you today. I really wish I could be there with you. I hope we can get this thing under control so that I'm able to commute again to Arizona. Because let me tell you, when I would tell people here in Pittsburgh, yeah, I'm a visiting professor at Arizona State, and they'd go, well, what does that mean? And I go, well, for 1 week a month, I fly to Phoenix. And they'd be like, what, are you crazy? And it's like, crazy. It's one of the most rewarding, refreshing things that I can do. And if anything, it keeps me young. Because I'll tell you, there's no greater way to learn than to teach. And it's something that I wish on all of you. So with that, I'll take any questions and turn it back over to Robert.
Hey, Don, thank you so much for that great talk. I'm sure everyone else is applauding as well. Kayla says, amazing, Don, thank you. And I'll also be reading any comments that are coming across on YouTube as well. David, would you like to speak your question as well? If not, I can read it straight up. Okay, so I'll go ahead and, oh, David would like to speak. Go ahead and unmute if you'd like. Oh, hold on, let me allow participants to unmute. Go ahead, sorry about that. You should be able to unmute now.
Oh, okay, there, now I can. What did I write? Yeah, I just wanted to push back a bit and see what, yeah, this idea that we're not, that we're failing at dealing with COVID because we all have, we don't have the right individual values. I mean, I think that just other countries did a far better job than we did, and it's certainly not because they have better values than we do. I mean, I think it's a question of, I mean, they just were able to operate at a larger scale, better leadership, and do things. I mean, what's the point of one state shutting down completely and the adjacent state, opening up and too early? I mean, we can't, even if we have the best values in the world, if we're not all operating together on it, none of it makes any sense. It's pointless for any state to shut down if the neighboring state isn't shut down. It just doesn't make any sense. So I just want to, yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe that it's because of our individual values of what is why we've not been able to respond well to COVID.
Okay, you've stated your case, right? So yeah. So let me respond. You have prioritized certain values that matter to you. And in a federalist system like the United States, where in fact you take a state like Pennsylvania, where every county, the other thing to keep in mind is the United States is the only country where school boards are the domain of the local region, where you have school boards. In Germany, the country decides what education is going to be. In France, it decides what it's going to be. The United States is a federal system where there's tremendous independence. And for a large portion of this country, that is more important than the value of health. Because if value health was that important, we wouldn't be the most obese society in the world. We wouldn't be the alcoholics that we happen to be. So, what you're basically saying, David, is that the federal government should make the decision of what are the most important values, and that then has to be enforced through some means, police or otherwise. And there's a vast part of this country that is basically pushing back at you, saying, sorry, you don't control my life. That's not Don's position. That's Don understanding why we are where we are.
Would anybody else like to ask any questions? I think Stacy has raised an interesting point about wondering whether this narrative of individual values and personal responsibility is a response to the lack of leadership that we've been seeing locally and across the nation.
Absolutely, which is why to thine own self be true. I mean, it's like the argument about wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. And if you want to wear a mask as a way, in fact, just the other day, I encountered an argument that was occurring on the street here in Pittsburgh about wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. And if anything, I thought, well, good for you for engaging in the argument. I thought the argument was a good argument. And it was and frankly, it was both of those points that I was talking about. But I would like, since I'm at ASU, I would like individual responsibility to occur on Mill Avenue on a Friday and a Saturday night. I mean, I don't get drunkenness, but then again, my father was a drunk. My wife's father was a drunk. I don't understand that. I don't drink, but that's because I don't drink. So, ultimately, the individual has to create his or her value system and live up to it. So, and in response to, I have to tell you, you'll laugh at this. I'm a trained campaign manager. I was sent to Washington, D.C. in 1975 to learn how to manage a campaign. And that's when Don was an idealist. I was still an idealist. And I went there and I hobnobbed with Senator Hines, with Representative Rhodes. And I realized how politics has got to be the ugliest, dirtiest business on the planet. And I got out. Oh my God, did I get out? When I was told that my job was to be a pimp, I got out. And it's funny because they sat me down and they were basically like, Don, do you know what a groupie is? And it's like, yeah, I used to do rock bands, audio systems when I was in high school as a overhire. And they were like, you've seen nothing like groupies in politics. And I was like, you know what? Let me get out of this. But I've got my own moral system that I subscribe to. And fortunately, as a Catholic, I get to confess repeatedly my shortcomings.
I think Eleanor has another question.
Please.
Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, Eleanor. Oh, cannot unmute. Let me see. I did. Oh, okay. Now you should be able to unmute.
Okay.
Sorry about
that. I'm all right now. Following up with what you said, Don, you talked about how politics being such a dirty, horrible business. And you also talked about changing things is the way we have to go at post-COVID, working from home, learning from home, all this for the betterment of everyone, not just the environment. Because of everything that's happened, people refusing to wear a mask for their own personal freedoms over everyone's well-being, do you think there'll ever be a change in politics where it becomes a better place, or do you think we have to go down to this dirty place to get work done?
It's one of the reasons I'm a big believer in NGOs, non-government organizations. And in fact, I would have liked to have seen NGOs step up even more, like the Gates Foundation and all that. Politics is dirty. And as long as it's run by money, and let's face it, we're in the midst of it right now. It's about money, money, money. I get hit up by every Tom, Dick, and Harry who's running for office. We have a pretty abusive system when it comes to that, and even democracy when it comes to education. I mean, who runs for school board nowadays? I mean, many of the people running for school board are not exactly the most enlightened people possible. For example, I'm on the board, let's look at charter schools versus public schools. I'm on the board of 3 charter schools, primarily because they are open to innovation in learning. And in fact, I've donated technology galore to the charter schools. What do we have in the American Federation of Teachers and all that? They're not in favor of charter schools. Now, a lot of that comes back to the fact that how are charter schools funded? Now, that's a state-by-state thing, but for example, here in Pennsylvania, what happens is if a school leaves a bricks and mortar and goes to a charter school, then the bricks and mortar school district must write a check in the amount of what it would cost to educate that student in a bricks and mortar school and sends that check to the charter school. The charter school has much less bricks and mortar. For example, PA Cyber is 11,000 students. They're getting money from 11,000 not 11,000 school districts, but school districts for those 11,000 students. And so you can see the disparity there between bricks and mortar and charter schools. So I mean, it's a very complicated issue, but charter schools are one way, you could almost say, semi-NGO of competing with public schools that are failing their students.
Mhm.
Does that help at all?
No, I like the connection you made with that, and it does help. It's kind of like outside of the system.
Exactly. And let me tell you, the system is fighting back big time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
David is pointing out that charter schools are public schools, however. It's just a note.
You know, David is, I love David. I mean, David is, they are public schools. They do have to respond to the Department of Education, but they have a heck of a lot more freedom than public schools. David, do you want to push back on that?
Hang on here. Push back on what again?
Having greater freedom than public schools?
I mean, I think the biggest fundamental difference is that the teachers in public schools aren't in the unions. They're not unionized the same way. So the political force behind the teachers is different. Yeah, but they're publicly funded. All I wanted to say was public. I mean, there's often a discussion. I'm on the fence, but I don't know how to feel about public versus charter versus standard public schools. But technically they're both public school. They're both publicly funded. Yeah.
Right, but by the same token, you can have charter schools that also have a private funding aspect as well. If you know, we could also get into parochial schools. And all that, but.
So I think we're almost out of time. So I'd like to end on a question of my own. I think that what was really fun part of your talk was you showing pictures of places that had experienced devastation, and then pictures of the modern age of showing how those places have brought themselves out of the devastation. I think if we wanted to draw an analogy to saying that today's devastation that we're seeing is a lack of what you're calling common sense or common decency. What is the pathway out so that in the future that we are able to see the beauty of everybody being able to have common sense? How do we make common sense more common in your view?
Common sense is when you have citizenry that goes to the riot zone and starts to clean up on their own without any sort of government telling them to do so or not do so. The sad thing is the media that does not cover that. You know, it's funny because as a drama professor, I knew that my art form was basically doomed when media realized that the essence of drama is conflict. And so the more conflict you can focus upon, the more drama you get. And most of us are drawn to the car accident or to any aspect of drama that is going on. Because you have to remember, I'm young and I'm old enough to remember when the evening news was 15 minutes and it was Huntley and Brinkley sitting in front of a TV as a talking head, a camera as a talking head, basically telling us that there was a fire here, there was a murder there, there was this. And once the news became basically entertainment and became drama, things went south. But nothing made me feel better than, frankly, Jimmy Carter, who I thought was a lousy president and is the best post-president we've ever had. The work that he's doing with Habitat for Humanity, God bless that man. God bless him. When those people showed up in Minneapolis and in Ferguson, just citizenry to clean up. Here in the pandemic, the community food banks that have rallied around. I mean, here in Pittsburgh, it's been absolutely incredible. The volunteers that have donated food, donated everything from food to plasma. That gives me hope. And you know, it's not like I'm demanding the news to become goody two shoes, but for God's sakes, there's hope out there and it's manifested. You know, let me close by saying why does Don love Pittsburgh and why has Don lived in Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh is where Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was filmed all of its years. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was filmed like 6 blocks from my house at the studios of WQED, the first public broadcasting station in the United States. And as Mr. Rogers said, whenever there's a catastrophe, look for the helpers, okay? Look for the helpers. Who comes and tries to make things good? And you know what? If you can make yourself one of those who goes to make things good, perhaps it will have an impact on others. Again, we go walking in the parks, on the trails and all that, and we always go with a bag. And you know what? It feels pretty good when all of a sudden somebody walks by and sees we got our bag filled with trash and says, thank you. And it's like, hey, thank Mother Nature. We're here for Mother Nature. Okay, let me leave you with that.
Well, Don, thank you for being a helper and thank you for your time and your words of wisdom. And everyone else, thanks for hanging out with us, and we hope you join us again next week.